Hello everyone, here we are again. We made it through March, and now, according to the calendar, it's time to talk about what else I saw last month that I didn't review. As always, it's a mix of films from different genres, different eras, even this time around from different countries, and hopefully there's something for everyone. I'm gonna warn you though that we're diving right into it with a heavy-hitting film, 1983's Testament. The 80s gave us a lot of horrifying nuclear films. This is perhaps the most intimate, and all the more emotional and soul-crushing because of it. Set entirely in a suburban town, it focuses on a mother of three, played by Jane Alexander, who struggles to hold her family together after a nuclear attack. And as the fallout slowly approaches, she faces the heartache of societal breakdown, radiation sickness, and death. It's a very sad, difficult movie, and a personal one. It's far too easy to imagine yourself in the main character's shoes. Honestly, if I think about the scenario for too long, I feel like bursting into tears. This is a film that affected my mom deeply. She's always had an affinity for this genre of film, but with this one, she so completely sympathized with the mother, with her mundane frustrations with life before the bomb, and her struggles to hold everything together after. So it became one of those movies she watched a lot, rough as it is to get through. She showed it to my siblings back in the day, but lucky me, I pretty much missed out on that. I think I did see it, or see some of it, or at least was in the room while it was on, but I was too young to comprehend it. All I remembered were a couple images, one of them that I did understand and found upsetting, even as a little child. And with that seared into my memory, I resolved not to see this film. Obviously, I broke that resolve. I knew when I sat down, on purpose, to watch this last month that it's a depressing, upsetting movie. But while it is tragic, it is a good film, and it certainly stays with you. I think I can go at least a decade without revisiting it, but it was very good, and you might want to check it out sometime. You should just be aware of what you're getting into. I'm not really in the business of mentally scarring my unsuspecting viewers with my movie recommendations, which is also why I'm giving a content warning for this next film, although for a completely different reason. Movie number 2 is quite a change of pace, another 80s film, the 1989 underwater sci-fi horror thriller Leviathan. A deep-sea silver mining crew encounters a sunken Soviet ship and unwittingly picks up some kind of organism. An Italian-produced horror film with Stan Winston creature effects and a Jerry Goldsmith score, I describe this one as a clear cross between Alien and The Thing, the John Carpenter one. There are a lot of familiar faces in the cast, which is led by Peter Weller, one of my mom's favorites, especially at this age. I'm not including many creature pictures here for two reasons. Number one, spoilers. Number two, every phase of this creature is gross, and I don't like to put gross stuff in my videos. That said, while there are lots of scares and yucky creature visuals, there's nothing I found really unbearable. I do think I'm able to handle stuff like this better than I used to, which is either because I've become desensitized over the years, having watched a lot of scary monster movies, or I've just become more interested in figuring out how they do that, and that helps me be less afraid. That said, watching John Carpenter's The Thing once was enough for me, thank you very much, and while I think that Alien and Aliens are both excellent movies and I would watch those again, every time the xenomorphs show up, I still cover my eyes, and I don't think that's ever going to change. This one was never that bad for me, and anyway, it's got plenty of corniness to distract you if things get too serious, and also quite a few raunchy jokes in the beginning, especially from Daniel Stern's pervy character. You know, there are so many movies like this that I think it's its own subgenre. Horror movies set either way down in the ocean or way out in space, where something terrible sneaks aboard and starts picking people off. If you like this kind of thing, as I generally do, you never really get tired of seeing how the premise will turn out. This one held my attention and made me feel tense throughout. It was scary enough that I was bracing myself for something around every corner, but it was still fake enough and cheesy enough that I never got too into it and had to run away screaming. Movie number 3 is based on a true story, 1955's The Court-Martial of Billy Mitchell. Gary Cooper stars as General Mitchell, who went toe-to-toe with the U.S. Army to secure more funding and better safety measures for pilots in the early days of the Air Force. Cooper is good in the role, even though he seems like he might be a little old for the part. The supporting cast includes familiar faces from classic films, as well as actors who would go on to have major television careers in the next decade. The second half takes place mostly in a shady courtroom, where Mitchell's entire career and reputation and the future of the Air Force are on trial. One of the biggest moments, I think, is when Mitchell takes the stand and faces interrogation from a vicious attorney played by Rod Steiger. The courtroom scenes also come to a head with a significant aha moment, which I won't ruin for you should you choose to watch the movie. I will say this, though, the copy Prime is streaming isn't great, with some odd coloring and occasionally blurry and cropped shots. I think that must be a problem with the copy they have, as that's not the quality I expect from a film directed by Otto Preminger. Movie number 4 is a French film directed by Jean-Pierre Melville, 1967's Le Samouraï, which is French for The Samurai. This is a very stylish film in which Alain Delon stars as a hired killer who finds himself in hot water when he's witnessed leaving the scene of the crime. I thought this movie might be slow, artsy to the point of being pretentious, and confusing. What I found is that it is a little slow, but it's building tension. It's artistic, but not pompous, and it wasn't confusing for me until the last half hour or so. So I liked the film, but it did leave me with a few questions. Afterward, I was flipping through the booklet. I rented the Criterion release from the library back when that was still open, and there I learned that, at least according to Melville's vision, some of my questions aren't supposed to have answers. I find that a little frustrating. Still, there's a lot to appreciate. It's got an engrossing story, and there's a lot to take in. The jazz score, the architecture, the interior design, which can be posh or shabby depending on the place. And obviously there's Alain Delon, who plays it very cool in a simple but classy 40s-esque wardrobe, a look that became popular for a time after the movie's release. Why yes, I did talk about an Alain Delon movie just last month. I'm going through a thing right now, okay? I found him more endearing in Zorro, of course, which I picked first on purpose because it's a lighter, more friendly role. He barely cracks a smile here. But of the two, he's definitely more closely associated with this film and this character, the stoic, solitary hitman with his own moral code, a modern-day samurai in Paris. If anyone watching this video is thinking, don't you ever watch anything romantic? I finally have something for you on this list. 1985's Ladyhawke. It's a medieval fantasy in which a pickpocket assists a pair of doomed lovers in an attempt to break the curse that makes her a hawk by day and him a wolf by night, so that they must be, quote, always together, eternally apart. Directed by Richard Donner, this is a film that at times reminded me of The Never-Ending Story, Labyrinth, and The Princess Bride, also Ivanhoe, but with a very 80s music score. Matthew Broderick plays Philippe, the pickpocket of indeterminate age with a pseudo-English accent and a habit of talking to God. He's the comic relief, but also the occasional sage, and the most charming thing about the character is how emotionally invested he gets in the love story. It's not such a surprise, though, because so do we. The cursed couple is played by Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer, who are both excellent. I read that Rutger Hauer was originally cast as a villain. Thank goodness for the last-minute twist that allowed him to step in as Navarre, the role he wanted all along. He was great, and the character is appealing yet complex, and Michelle Pfeiffer just glows. Obviously, they don't share much screen time, but you still get a good sense of their closeness, and their ache to be reunited is compelling. I really like both the concept and the execution of the love story, the way these two people continue to stay close by each other and protect each other, even though one of them is always an animal and they may never see or touch or speak to each other again. There's a lot of nobility and faithfulness, and it's quite lovely. The movie does have its corny moments and some longish fight and chase sequences. It is also an action-adventure film, and while I was pleased with the ending, I did come away with some questions regarding how the curse works, but that's not really that important. I enjoyed the movie. It's got several beautiful moments that I'm still thinking about a couple weeks later, and I can't neglect to mention that it co-stars John Wood as the villainous bishop and Leo McKern as the humorous and endearing monk. Movie number 6 is a drama from 1964, Flight from Ashiya. It's about members of the U.S. Air Rescue Service based in Japan who go out on a mission to rescue people caught on the ocean during a typhoon. It focuses on 3 men, played by Richard Widmark, Yul Brynner, and George Chakiris, who each have personal tragedies that are holding them back as they try to do their duty, and we learn about these stories in lengthy flashbacks. The story beats are familiar, even somewhat predictable, but it's okay. For the most part, I liked this one well enough, especially considering it was a total impulse watch. Most notably, I think it features one of the most emotional performances I've seen from Widmark, and if you've been following for a while, you know I've seen quite a few Richard Widmark movies. Movie number 7 is the Downton Abbey movie, which came out last year. I felt pretty apathetic about the release of this one, as I felt the show had just about run its course well before it concluded. I was tired of most of the characters and their drawn-out drama, and ready for it to be over. But I feel like they waited a good amount of time for this, long enough to feel fresh, but not so long that I couldn't remember anything and everyone was a stranger. The story revolves around a short visit from the King and Queen of England, which of course sets both the family upstairs and the servants downstairs in a flurry of activity and stress. It feels like one very long episode, or a short season. I found the way they handled it pretty satisfying. It's long enough to catch up with people, not so long that I got sick of them. The opening sequence was a little rough for my parents and me. Wait, who's that? What's his name again? Did they get married? Wasn't he sick? Oh, she got arrested or something, didn't she? How many kids did they have again? But it evened out soon enough. It helps a lot that the whole cast came back to play themselves, and it's like they never stopped, which made it feel cozy. The writing maintained a decent balance where just about everybody gets a share of the spotlight, yet a few threads have more prominence. I didn't love all of it, but I enjoyed it more than I expected to. That said, I know at least some of the cast would like to go on and make more movies, and I'd be fine if they didn't. Movie number 8 is a creepy Irish film from 2019, The Hole in the Ground. Here we have another one of those horror films that keeps things short and simple to its advantage. A woman and her son have just moved into a new house that she's fixing up. After their discovery of a giant sinkhole in the woods beyond the house, she notices her son's odd behavior and starts to suspect that he is an imposter. The film withholds certain information, leaving you to vacillate between 2 or 3 theories of what you think is really happening. It's one of those movies where you might say, okay, I think I know where this is going, and depending on how they handle it, it could be good, or it could be stupid. I liked the movie overall, so I guess I didn't think it was stupid. There are some disturbing moments that had me on edge, and there were a couple points where I was scared. The mother's struggle is a compelling one. It's artistic and atmospheric, but not frustratingly confusing, and the film has some great visuals, starting with the ambiguity of the opening in an abandoned hall of mirrors and followed by a disorienting shot of the car traveling down the road. It's a pretty simple shot, really, but it made my stomach churn. I don't usually go for creepy kid movies, but I liked this one. Movie number 9 is another impulse watch, 1956's Foreign Intrigue. Robert Mitchum stars as the press agent of a mysterious rich man who apparently drops dead of a heart attack. But Mitchum starts asking questions when multiple people say, "I heard that when you found him he was still alive. Did he say anything?" Mitchum goes on a hunt for answers that takes him to the Riviera, Vienna, and Stockholm, where he ends up getting more than he bargained for. It's an interesting film that gave me Third Man vibes, with the American guy going around asking quirky foreigners in picturesque settings about the sketchy circumstances of an associate's death. The movie boasts that it was filmed in Eastman color, which I have never heard of. It looked a little odd at first, but once I got used to it, I found it a very attractive film visually, gorgeous to look at, with some beautiful ladies' costumes and hair. But I think I know why this one never really took off. It lacks a consistent tone. There are humorous side exchanges and entire sequences that seem to take a break from the plot, and then the story comes back like, oh yeah, so anyway, we're trying to figure out what this guy was up to. This distracted tone is set up from early on. Mitchum walks in a solemn funeral procession, which comes to a stop, and a little boy on the side sticks out his foot and starts kicking the back of his leg. In the end, I found the movie's tendency to stray both a blessing and a curse. I felt somewhat disengaged by the end, but there were plenty of parts I enjoyed, especially because they were so random and funny. Movie number 10 is one that I kind of wondered if I should even mention, given the current situation, but I thought about it and I decided, since I did watch it and I did like it, I would talk about it. It's the 2013 Korean film Flu, in which a virus is carried to Bundang, a city near Seoul, and runs rampant, launching panic and chaos and raising concerns about cutting the entire city off. Yes, it sounds eerily familiar, and I completely understand why some would rather give it a wide berth right now. But I enjoyed the film, which is one I probably would have watched sooner than this if I'd known about it. Amazon Prime just happened to recommend it to me right now. I liked it better than Contagion, but not as much as Outbreak, which is one of those movies I always want to stick around and watch if I happen to catch it on TV. It was interesting to see how Korean filmmakers handled the subject, especially as this was made in the wake of and in response to the swine flu epidemic. I will say that its beginning and ending seemed a little long. It focuses primarily on a handful of characters that it takes its time introducing, which I do appreciate, that's not really a fault, but there was a point early on when I thought, so, about that disease? And later, I thought the movie was drawing to a close when there was still half an hour left to go. But I thought it was a good, engrossing movie. This was my second Korean film. I saw the zombie movie Train to Busan in 2018, and so far, they're 2 for 2 for me. The last movie that I watched in March was the 1937 Chinese horror film Song at Midnight. It is a loose adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera, which has been remade many times. The most prominent remake is probably 1995's The Phantom Lover, which I reviewed at the end of January. I had long thought that this was an extremely rare film, so I was very surprised to discover it was streaming on Prime. Unfortunately, the quality isn't great, but that may be because the film itself has deteriorated. The picture is very dark, and the sound is sometimes wonky. I wish I knew how it's supposed to be, if it's supposed to move as slowly as it does, if the voices are supposed to sound so high-pitched. At least the subtitles aren't full of typos, as they used to be. To a point, the story's the same. A band of actors takes possession of a theater that's said to be haunted by the ghost of a singer, Song Dan-ping, who was killed 10 years before. Knowing the plot already made it much easier to follow along, although the 37 version includes a political subplot that the other one didn't have. And there are certainly differences. The other version is more romanticized and places more of an emphasis on the music, and the last act is very different. Even though I found watching it a rocky experience, I did make note of some good stuff. The equivalent of the unmasking scene was good. I noticed the use of some Dutch angles, which made me wonder if the director was influenced by German Expressionism. There's a particularly good, agonizing sequence when the theater troupe is led down a dark, creepy hallway, and the camera keeps cutting between the gloom ahead and their increasingly apprehensive expressions. This film has a lot of atmosphere. But unfortunately, because of the audio-visual issues, which were a lot to cope with in a 2-hour film, I had trouble staying engaged, and I'm disappointed about that because I'd wanted to see it for such a long time. Maybe someday someone will clean it up and release a restored edition. That would be nice. Until then, I feel like I can't give it a final verdict. But if you're curious, you can check it out for yourself and see what you think. Alright everybody, that's the list of movies for March. I hope you enjoyed it. I don't know what this next month will hold, as my library is closed indefinitely and I can't order anything that I might have been planning to get and review, but that's okay, I will adjust. As always, there's a list of the movies that I mentioned in the description. Feel free to share any of your thoughts on the movies that I talked about in the comments below, and I will see you next time. Stay safe out there, okay? Thanks for watching.